Well, for more on the WhatsApp move, I'm joined by Scott Schober in New York City. He's president and CEO of Berkeley Veritronics Systems. It helps companies and government organizations manage secure facilities and maintain wireless networks. WhatsApp has more than 1 billion users, as Sean just pointed out. How does this impact the landscape, and will others follow suit, do you think?
Yeah, you make a great point. They have a tremendous user base, over 1 billion users. There's about 30 billion messages sent each and every day, which is just mind-blowing when we think about it. It really does. It sets a precedent. They're following suit. What Apple did and many other technology companies will certainly follow suit as well. And keep in mind, they're a messaging service. Apple sells phones. WhatsApp sells a messaging service. Contrast that to a telecom company such as China Mobile. China Mobile's got 806 million subscribers, so WhatsApp is significantly larger, and they have to play by different rules when government agencies approach them.
How does this fit into this narrative in the recent battle between Apple and the FBI over encryption following those San Bernardino attacks last year?
Good question there. Really, if you think about it, Apple's stance, they want to remain neutral. They want to sell phones. They want to sell computers. WhatsApp, again, wants to sell a messaging service, and they get their money from advertising in games and some subscription as well. They want to focus on their business model. They don't want to now have to work with law enforcement personnel and provide information or content. That's not their business focus. So by having end-to-end encryption, now they could simply say, hey, we can't delve into the content, we can't provide it, they can't comply, period.
And it seems interesting, Scott, and I want to get your thought about this. It seems the megaphone goes from one person to the next. The most recent megaphone, law enforcement saying this is terrible, it's helping terrorists and everything. But if you go back just a short period of time, you got whistleblower Edward Snowden, who's showing that the NSA is collecting all this data, and they may be spying on you, just a regular person. It really creates this debate over privacy versus national, international security. So how does this advance that conversation, do you think?
Yeah, it certainly does advance it more, and companies are going to be coming forward talking about it, which is really good, I think. It needs to be done. And in the case specifically with Apple, there really was a big overreach by the government in this case. They could have gotten help. They could have better worked FBI and NSA to actually get the information off the phone. What they really were asking, though, they wanted a backdoor. They wanted the IP, the know-how to have access to the encryptions, which would open up basically Pandora's box, really, for encryption for all phones, all manufacturers, as it got into other countries' hands and even into terrorist hands. So it would have been a lot worse if Apple did comply with the court order that they were given, and they really did overreach at the government, in my opinion.
One final question for you, Scott, before you take off. Law enforcement in the end, though, said, hey, look, we figured out a way in. Does this mean that we're going to have hackers who can figure out a way into WhatsApp? I mean, are there people who are going to be able to break this?
Sure, to some degree, everything is hackable. You got to admit that, and I think the government realizes it, Apple realizes it, but why make it any easier? And keep in mind, the Apple phones they're talking about are an older iPhone C. The new iPhone 6 and especially the new iPhone 7 will be much, much harder to actually break the encryption.
Scott, thanks so much for joining us from New York. Really appreciate it.